Good morning, everyone. Thank you again for joining us this morning for the product hour. For folks who are new to this webinar, it's a bi-weekly webinar that we host to talk about various new product features, best practices, and use cases that we learn from our customers and customer success team. If you have registered, you'll receive a recording at the end of the webinar. We'll send that to you later today. And this is an informal session, so feel free to ask questions anytime during the demo, and we'll try to answer them during the demo or towards the end of the webinar. Next, Gautam. So aside from the product hour, we have resources. So like to learn more about Workato, you can go to docs.workato, and we have a YouTube channel that you can subscribe to stay updated on the latest features, tutorials, and demos. And also subscribe to our product blog at product.workato.com to stay updated on latest and greatest on the product features. So in the next 57 minutes, if not an hour, today's topic is about supercharging your SaaS applications by embedding with embed solutions with Workato. And I'll be joined by Gautam, who heads up our product team, and Grace, who is the lead product manager for the embed solutions. And the agenda looks like we'll kick it off with a quick overview of Workato, the company, the product, how customers are using Workato, and go over a quick overview of like Azure, how do you know you're ready to consider an embed solution, and the eternal conundrum like build versus buy, and then give product demos around the different paths to embedding Workato in your SaaS product. So that said, Gautam, welcome back. And Grace, you're joining the product hour after a long time, so great to have you back. That said, I'll hand it off to you.
Hello, everyone. My name is Gautam. I know several of you today are new to Workato, so we just will do a quick intro overview of the company, and then we'll just jump right into the discussion. We started the company to create an integration automation platform that can be used by everyone. So you know, the primary focus being the ability to sort of cater to multiple personas should not come at the expense of the power, as in what you can do with the platform. We have over 6,000 customers. We operate a GitHub-like community where integrations that are built by our customers, they can actually share that in this community. So someone else can come in, they can look for a code-to-cash solution, find these recipes, and simply just start using them. So really very much like GitHub, helps you get bootstrap faster. Any integration platform is as good as the connectivity that it provides. We have well over 1,000. We'll sort of get into the details as we go through the discussion today. We are ranked as leaders by both Gartner and Forrester, and I think as sort of I was talking about our focus, what sort of really intrigued, what's great about some of the feedback that we got is that simplification, ease of use, speed does not necessarily mean a lack of power. This is an overview of the different integrations and automations that our customers use us for. And the reason this is sort of interesting also from a embed perspective is you may have a product that is focused on marketing, you may have a product that's focused on support, and what sort of this tells us is that we already have a significant amount of usage in those areas that can actually help with your solution. While we have an incredible group of high growth tech companies that sort of use us to optimize, to improve their operations. We also have several modern SaaS companies that use us in an embed mode where they use Workato to address their customers' integrations and automation needs. So jumping right in to sort of the main topic, you're sort of a SaaS company. You're growing very fast, and really, if you think about modern SaaS applications, really nearly every one of those companies, they already have an API. So having an API is really table stakes to facilitate integration. And also many of them do have support already for a handful of integrations, things that sort of are so important that they have actually built those integrations into their platform. So the sort of from what we hear from our embed customers is that at a point in their journey where they already have this and they're continuing on, and then sort of at a point they're sort of faced with this prospect of, now, should I continue on this journey of building it myself, or is this the right time for me to look at a partner to help me with this? Some of what we hear from our customers, the top things that we hear are, the first is that is the app catalog. You started out, you were able to build integrations to 4 or 5 applications, but the sort of the need for connecting to a new application is just constantly growing. It starts with a handful, but then very soon is 20, 30, and then we have partners that actually have to solve for a long tail. So it gets into like 100 plus. Then the other is you were able to build a really incredible integration to some of the top apps, but it's very sort of it is on a point-to-point basis where something happens, it goes to the other side. But then your customers, especially if you're selling to mid-market and enterprise, they need more customization, not just customizations in the fields and so on, but really customization in actually the logic itself. They may actually it may just not be one application to another. There may be an intermediate database that they need to look up and so on. So the complexity of what your customers are trying to achieve starts to grow. Then many of our partners here, they have sort of they aspire to be a hub application, as in the sort of becoming like the clearinghouse for workflows surrounding their application. So essentially, they're looking for a Salesforce's force.com type environment, but at the same time, it is a significant investment to build. But that's another area where some of our customers start thinking about whether to partner. And of course, the last is simply just new ARR. I mean, many of our customers here, they actually price it. In fact, they may have like they usually have different tiers. Some of the lower tiers are included, but the higher tiers of integration and automation, they start pricing. Of course, all of these are sort of requirements, but then if it starts creating sales friction, as in the context of a sales, you need connectivity to an application that you don't have, or downstream you're looking at churn issues. I think at this point, sort of the data on the correlation between more apps integration and churn is really clear. So that's often a big topic, and of course, all of this creating too much pressure on the product team to build integrations and actually putting core product capabilities into backlog. Now we'll jump into sort of once you look through those reasons, and if you are in a position where it really starts to make sense that it may actually just be more efficient and speedy to partner, you have to think about what is the right sort of partner for you. And this is a particularly tricky and I would say much more strategic decision than even using a product like this. in-house, because once you actually integrate this product, you're actually making this available to your customers. So the cost of it not working, the customers, your customers are not really going to be sort of like very sympathetic to the fact that this actually may have been OEM'd, and it's really the OEM product not working effectively. So it's really sort of your brand takes the hit. And also the cost of switching is very hard. You already have a set of customers using it, then you sort of decide that this is really not the product, and if you want to switch, the switching costs are really high. So what we hear from our customers, of course, in this, I'm going to, you absolutely have to work with the best iPaaS, the sort of the in terms of the core capability. But then there are a set of OEM specific considerations, and here I'm going to focus on the OEM consideration. The first one, the most important one, is what is the user experience that you desire to provide to your end customer? And for some of you, really ultimately depends on the persona. But for some of our customers, they actually cater to multiple personas. So you actually may not only do you want to have the option of having multiple experiences, but you may actually have to support all of them at the same time, because you may be selling to mid-market as well as enterprise and sort of their different personas. The second, and we will go into details, right? It sort of spans from completely embedding this capability to just having sort of basic on-off experience, as we call it. So we'll sort of walk you through the spectrum of options. On the build experience, this is really your engineering team. It is about your customers' success team in terms of what is the experience for them. How do you do single sign-on? Do you have does it support JWT? How do you when you build an integration, how do you push it out to all your customers? So the build experience, the breadth again of capability that is available is important, because different customers have different needs there. And I talked about connectivity. I'll talk about, one is just the availability of connectors, but also equally important is sort of, can anyone build a connector? In order to build a connector, do I have to go back to my partner, or can I build it? Can partners build it? Is there a community where if somebody built a connector, can they share it with the community so someone else can use it? So essentially, this is all about reducing friction. You just don't want to be in a situation where if you need a connector, only the vendor can provide it for you. Ops and admin, I think, we just sort of customers start out with tens of customers, but very quickly it can get into the hundreds. And the level of ops capability in terms of, can I do delegated administration? If something goes wrong in a customer account, can I get notified? How do I safely provide access to these accounts for my customer success team? What kind of governance is available? All of that becomes very, very important. And of course, finally, all of this has to not just work, but it also has to scale. Is this partner that you're thinking, does this partner have enterprise credibility? Do they bring independent credibility to your customers, or you have to use your brand's credibility to bring them in? So this is where sort of analysts, existing customer base, all of that becomes important. With that, we'll sort of jump into each section. We'll go into the details. We'll demo some of this. So we'll get started with the customer user experience. Essentially, how do your customers work with this new capability? Grace, do you want to sort of go into it?
I'll jump in. Yep. Thanks, Gautam, for that overview. I think gives us a good overview of why OEM. And when we're moving on to this first point of customer UX options, as Gautam, you mentioned earlier, this is really the most important part of the journey. When you partner with an iPaaS, you really want to see the variety of options that you can offer your end customers. And when we built this OEM product, because we saw such a big variety of partners that were kind of coming in, we knew that this flexibility in UX would be paramount. So let's take a look at some of those options right now. And we'll answer the following questions as well. Gautam, do you want to switch over to the next slide? Or? So, what are we trying to kind of address here? Ideally, our customers' experience, is that always at top of mind. So the first question you might ask is, who is the one actually building and managing these integrations, right? So what is the end customer persona? Are they technical, not so technical, or business kind of process folks? And
so,
what kind of
Grace,
solution?
this is our OEM partners customer.
That's right. The end customer of the OEM partner. So, looking at the persona, it's also important to kind of decide at this point, who is going to start to build these integrations and manage these integrations. Because on one hand, we have the partners themselves building and managing, and on the other, the power is given to the customer to kind of build and manage their own recipes and integrations. And of course, what does ideal mean? This is really, it varies from partner to partner. And also it varies from partners and customer to end customer. As I mentioned, they have different needs and different personas that are actually working in integration. So these are the things that we would want to really consider in terms of providing the best customer UX. Yep. So, yeah, moving on to kind of the first piece in the UX. The ability to kind of customize an app marketplace thing, why is this really important, right? Because from the end customer's perspective, we're really thinking about the point of discovery. So bringing back, coming back to your point, Gautam, where there's an aspiration to kind of be a hub app or an app in the middle of a whole suite of apps from all sorts of verticals. From the customer's point of view, this is important because they can now see your app as a fit with the suite of apps that they're maybe already using. So if your customers see that, hey, I can now save maybe 10x amount of time because I already use this CRM or this payroll system that you already integrate with, I think that's an immediate win. And so, yeah, that's and the ability to kind of create this app marketplace really stems from the platform APIs that we kind of expose, so that partners have the ability to pull all this information about connectors on Workato and actually use that in building their own curated marketplace, as you see on the screen here.
So here, essentially, the customer is able to identify a set of applications that they want to support, and then for each of those can offer pre-built integrations that their customers can either just use as is or modify and so on.
Yeah, and we'll see an example of that in the next slide, actually. So, once we navigate from that app marketplace into a specific application.
Click here on, sorry, Grace. So we clicked on Zendesk and we end up in this sort of more detailed screen.
That's right. So these are, a couple of screenshots from different products, but that's exactly it, right? So we click on one of the apps and we, hop into the ability to actually provide your customer an on-off experience. So that, you can see that there are a couple of syncs here that happen from this product blue to Zendesk, and they can kind of turn that on and off by providing some inputs into the actual integration.
And Grace, so this is completely customizable, right? This is essentially put together by the end customer using our APIs, and in some cases where they may even use embeddable iframe widgets.
That's correct. So the partner is the one that actually puts these screens together on their product, and then the end customer would be consuming these.
Okay. Should I go to the next one?
Yep, let's do that. So this one, is really inline experience, or the idea of actually extending, the functionality of your product or your app. Right, so we see on the screen here an HR app with a customized button, basically syncing, a particular offer letter or document to a payroll system from this HR app. And in the back, what is actually happening is that this button is really calling or triggering off one of the Workato recipes, and in turn, it's doing all the processing. But what your customer really sees is this button and the ability to kind of immediately sync a document to the payroll system. So it's a completely inline experience. You can customize it fully to the needs of the customers and the needs of your application.
That's right. And in this particular case, I mean, the advantage of this type of sort of, I mean, there's typically we see both. One of the advantage of this type of approach is that in the context of doing something already in your product, if there is sort of a need for on-demand integration, then you can just surface up a button that's sort of tied to an API, and when your customer clicks on that button, it then executes that. In this case, it is actually taking this sort of document and syncing with payroll, but you can also do things like where you're actually fetching data from a different application and then synchronously bringing the data over, and you can render that here. So both are popular options.
Yep. So moving on into the next experience, this is really, about embedding the Workato platform into, an application, right? So in this case, an application like an ERP, for example, will have the option to, if you go to the next slide, of them actually click on
here
one.
What we're seeing is just this is like the Acme product, right? And that's what we're seeing
Correct.
here.
Yep, this is just the Acme product dashboard and this ability to kind of embed the Workato platform into what we call the Acme Connect, and basically the integration landing page would be the embedded Workato.
And Grace, when we talk about embedded Workato, this is not like a wholesale embedding of everything, right? Our partners get to pick and choose and also completely control the end user experience. They can sort of bring selective components through iframes. They can use APIs to get access to our catalog and so on.
Mm-hmm. That's right. So so from the menu, all the menu items up is really, the partner, building that navigation flow and that whole experience. And then where Workato comes in, it will be in that iframe, just below those navigation options. So, everything that is accessible to the customer is really customized by the partner themselves. So here we see the ability for the customer to actually build recipes in line within the product, within Acme ERP itself.
And these are like perfect for use cases where, I mean, I talked about sort of 4 different sort of drivers. I mean, this is a case where the complexity of the integration is beyond just point to point where you're just moving some data. Here, the customer actually wants to build sort of additional logic.
Yeah, that's right. And we see that, if you kind of move on to the next slide as well, in the recipe that, the customer eventually built, they can, fully manage this on the embedded Workato platform and, run recipes here, test recipes and view, basically, the whole suite of things that we can do on the product itself. After building as well, there's the kind of management piece that comes in. So all the ability to kind of view and monitor your integrations thereafter. Basically, the connect piece will become a hub where all your customers go to manage their integrations. And it's the embedded Workato platform. Yeah.
So this is a case where it's not just the components around building, but also they're able to embed the administration and monitoring components as well. Again, this is a user experience that your product managers would control and decide what is the ideal experience for your customers. Should I go to the next one, Grace?
Yep, let's do that. So on the screen here, we're really showing the so-called white label experience. And we have this experience when the customer chooses to kind of maybe time is of the essence here, because we can really set a white label kind of experience up in a week or two of effort from the product team or the kind of managing team on both sides, right? So in this case, we have an example of Reich, one of our white label customers, and when they click on a certain link within the Reich application itself, it actually bounces out into a fully branded Workato page. Branded experience there is available to the customer as well. In this case,
go ahead,
sorry,
Chris.
go ahead, Gautam. Yeah.
So what is it? It really comes down to a choice between the sort of having from an embed point of view an option that provides like the best possible user experience, but it takes some effort from your product team. So this approach provides you with something really quick. In fact, the couple of weeks that need to be spent is around SSO and things like that. So there's ways to get started very quickly. So and the resulting user experiences where they start in your product but end up in a version of Workato that is actually branded, flavored. The apps that they see, all that experience is sort of is controlled by you, but it's just that they start in your product and they end up in a different one that's still branded and flavored for your customers.
Exactly. And moving on to an even kind of faster option, or something where you immediately need to kind of say yes to all your customers' integration asks, is really the partner built solutions, right? So here we're really building solutions on behalf of the customer, and then we have mechanisms which we'll share later on how to kind of push all these recipes into the customer accounts. But basically, the customers themselves don't really get exposed in this case to any recipe building. You're really kind of just providing the solution here in terms of integration for the customer.
So this is sort of the case where the partner is doing essentially providing a turnkey complex integration solution to their customers, right? This is beyond like a simple point-to-point on-off experience. This takes a lot of logic and so on. So but it is completely built by the partner. Grace, are we going to talk about, it still presents an interesting challenge, right? As in where you have you're building these integrations on behalf of your customer, but your customer does not want to share their app access credentials with you.
That's exactly right. This is really the biggest kind of hurdle that partner built solutions partners kind of face. They really need a way and a secure way to manage all these credentials that their customers then need to provide in order to make these integrations start working, right? So the customers need to supply the credentials, and we don't really want them to share it over any sort of unsecure channels and or over a call, which we've seen done in the past before. So we've come up with this connection widget. So this is really the ability to iframe the connection portion of Workato directly into your product, right? So in this case, the customer really just puts in their credentials, and the account is, this connection is authenticated, and then the partner can just take over and start building the recipes and developing them.
Okay. So this is basically, this is sort of they collected it, and then the connection was established, and all of that without you having to take their credentials, persisting them in your data center and so on, sort of just completely avoiding that.
Correct. Okay. And this is actually a really popular solution with partner built solutions as well. Okay, so after we've seen all the possible kind of UX options for your customers, we really want to move on into how we can go ahead and start building all these integrations that will make your customers successful.
So this is the set of capabilities. So go ahead, Grace.
Yeah, so this is the set of capabilities of our recipe editor, right? As Gautam mentioned, earlier on in the presentation, Workato is really built on the foundation that recipes or integrations should be accessible to everyone, right? So in terms of the low code, no code setup of our recipe editor, so on the left-hand side, you see kind of a screenshot, an example of how that would look like when you're building these integrations out on behalf of your customers, or if your customers themselves are the ones building the integrations. So it's visually very intuitive. It's really a low-code platform, no-code, low-code platform, and it'll cater to all levels of skill levels in terms of technical skill levels, and really it's the power behind all of this integrations comes from this this recipe builder.
And this is important because there are a set of integrations that you may provide to your customers that are just on off, in the sense that they are pre-built. Your team built the recipes, but your end customer is sort of just providing some input, providing connection information, and then they turn it on and the integrations work. So these recipes are still important because this gives your team the ability to build these things really quickly, and at the same time it's expressive enough, powerful enough that you can actually model all your use cases. It also gets important if your customers are needing this flexibility for themselves, where they want to build their logic is so custom that they actually need to directly build recipes and so on. The fact that these we make it so consumerized means that from your customer persona perspective, it's applicable to a broad set of that persona. Grace?
Yep. So I think Gautam touched on some really good points there. One really important point is that kind of is enabled by our recipe editor, and it's kind of the way that it's visually intuitive is the ability to kind of share recipes, right? So why is this really important? Because when someone looks at a recipe or an integration, they should immediately be able to tell by reading what this recipe does, right? Whether it syncs from A to B, what is the logic flow, if this then that, kind of true, false, or any kind of logic flows in the recipe, it should be immediately kind of apparent to the reader for the first time. And in this case, we have the building and sharing experience. So from a partner's point of view, you have the ability to push recipes from your admin account to your customers' accounts, right? So you build out these template recipes, maybe to get your users started with integrations, or for them to kind of just use wholesale. But the ability to kind of push them out from your admin panel here is a really, really important feature, because we can start building templates and solutions within the admin account, and then sharing these out immediately with all your customers and managing them through this one panel.
Hey, Grace, Gautam, we have a question. Are these recipes, they can only be used to connect like a partner's application with other applications, or can they also be used to build workflows within the partner application?
That's a great question. The answer is yes, and also it happens quite. I mean, there's actually it's a huge number of use cases are in that category as well, and it's particularly around applications that aspire to be like a central hub. So yes, and actually there are some very sophisticated, complex use cases that get built for things like we see often logic like when the rate of new tickets exceeds a threshold, then if the customer is in happens to be in this tier, then I want to do these set of things. And so yes.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions that we should take now, 3D?
No, this was the only one for now.
Okay, thanks.
Okay, so just kind of moving on to how the customers kind of the accounts will be set up within Workato. I think this is a really important point for security as well. So in the kind of Workato OEM product, there is going to be one account per end customer, right? So you can see the partner account right at the top of the tree there. The partner account then has the ability to provision all these child accounts or customer accounts, which then are kind of collaborated in with by all the people from the partner organization as well as from the end customer organization. So I think this kind of separation is really important for security. It makes ensures that all the recipes and assets, the connections are not shared between customers, and that the ability to kind of control how much access each user has in the customer teams is also controllable by role-based access as well.
And at the runtime, each of your customers' data is processed in isolation, right? It is processed in its own account. So there is not even the accidental possibility of sort of all your customers' data potentially mixing. Every one of your customers automatically gets provisioned an account, a child account with sort of your account as the parent, and you having all kinds of administration rights over these accounts.
That's right. I think this is quite an important distinction.
And Grace, are we sort of going to be talking about how these accounts can be dynamically provisioned and so on, or is this a good talk about that?
Yeah, this is a good time to talk about that. So if we move on to the next slide, actually, we have the ability. So the screenshot that you see on the right hand side here is the ability to provision these customer accounts directly from the admin UI. There's also the ability, of course, to provision these accounts via API, so programmatically. For example, when a customer clicks on a sign up button or a connect button within your product, that can trigger a set of APIs that provision these customer accounts, and the customer accounts automatically show up on the admin dashboard as well, which we'll cover a little bit later in the presentation.
And should we talk about plans here, or?
Yeah, so in the field.
Hey, Grace, there's a question related to this. Like, how does it work with SSO if the product supports SSO? How does it work with single sign-on?
That's a great question. So we have, a couple of customers that actually, kind of integrate with us with SSO. So we do have to kind of build it out. I think I also mentioned earlier that's on the white label kind of flow that the SSO piece does take a week or two for us to kind of build it out and have you as one of the providers. And then, once that is done, once you click on that button, there's a set of processes that go on behind the scenes where you send us a certain amount of information and we verify that this user is authenticated or has been authenticated before, and then it kicks off this same set of APIs that actually provision the customer accounts. So this SSO kind of syncing is definitely possible.
So Grace, there when you sort of meant when you were talking about SSO, I think you were also implicitly assuming a SAML2 approach versus a lot of our sort of the newer customers, we see them using JWT, right?
That's correct. Yeah. I think both are possible on the Workato platform today. So we can either authenticate users by SSO or JWT. Yeah, so we were talking about the custom plan. So you saw that on the previous screen that there was a field for plans. And in this screen here, once you provision the customers, you can see that there are a variety of types of plans with the tier 1, tier 2 with the number of connections. So what this alludes to, and it's really giving our partners the ability to customize the type of the type of plans that they themselves are selling to their customers, right? And to have that metric be reflected on the Workato admin console as well. So in this case, they would choose to kind of sell to their customers on a per connection basis, and then in the admin console here is reflected the same way.
And so the main sort of advantage is that you can have different tiers of plans. You can have a free plan or a trial plan where customers get to sort of use certain capabilities on a certain limited basis, and as well as you can have paid plans where if their sort of usage goes up on any of the metrics. In terms of metrics, we generally work with sort of the metrics that you already have in place, and we can sort of we can work with a variety of measures. The primary advantage is that you can have different kinds of plans and different monetization options and so on, and all of that can be managed here. So in the previous screen, when we showed creating a new account, one of the sort of options is to select which particular plan to assign the user to. And while we showed that, I just also want to sort of point out that oftentimes the account creation actually is dynamic, where at the point of some activity in your product that leads to this sort of, let's say, this functional area as part of that, the Workato account is dynamically provisioned. So it's not so both options, but most often that's sort of like the path that gets taken.
That's right. So you talked about, kind of provisioning the plan at the get-go, but, there's also the ability to kind of change the plans either via UI or via API as well, as, your customers go along the kind of sales journey, or if they, unsubscribe, let's say. You will be able to kind of change all those plan informations and plan types from within the UI as well as via API. So I think this is the kind of slide that we briefly talked about with the question just now. So there's ability to authenticate both via JWT and via SSO. So basically, both ways kind of ensure that the customer, if not logged in before, has a new account provisioned. And if they have logged in before, that they're authenticated into the right account and also signed into the right team. Okay, so moving on to the idea of a private community, right? So we've built all these recipes that we mentioned earlier. Now, how do we share that and push that out to our community of customers? So the first thing that
when we say private community, we are basically sort of what we're talking about is for our customers, our partners, to able to create a set of reusable assets. These assets can be recipes, these assets can be connectors, and sort of share that just with their customer base.
That's correct. That's correct. So the power of this that you see on the screen here is shared connectors, right? So we have the ability, which we'll cover a little bit later, to kind of build connectors really quickly in the product. So imagine if you have a really long tail of asks of customers, of customer asks for integrations with certain applications. You can build these connectors with our SDK framework, really quickly, and then put them up here and be able to kind of share them with all their customer accounts. And especially if you have some kind of private APIs or APIs that cannot be shared outside of this community, this would be a good way to kind of share all these connectors with your customers.
And the same thing applies to recipes as well.
That's correct. So
and
here,
sorry, Chris, I was just, all of these are also versioned as well, right? So we know that this version is being used, and we both for connectors and recipes, it's all versioned, so you can actually track. And there's also the concept of sandboxing, so you can test them and so on before you push them out.
That's exactly right. So within the customer's accounts, if they want to kind of accept the changes that are made by the partner, they can also do so. So basically, there is a child or parent relationship established, with all those assets. And here we see the shared collections, which are possible as well. So a collection is essentially, a group of recipes that make up a solution, right? So there's ability to kind of create those and push them out to the customers as well. So
And
this,
these are
yeah,
typically
this would
for
be
more, excuse me, Grace, go ahead.
yeah, this would be particularly effective for packaging entire pre-made solution to customers, and then they can basically install as a package and essentially have these run to create or to form a whole solution.
So generally useful for when you have more complex use cases like a employee onboarding or a code to cash that may span your application and a handful of other applications, and there's multiple interaction points, so it takes a set of recipes as well.
Yeah. So moving on to connectivity, I think this is a really important point as well. So we of course have 300 apps which your end customer now has the ability to kind of connect with. And these 300 plus connectors are maintained by Workato, and any API changes, any kind of updates to that, are handled by our team, right? So you as a partner don't have to kind of go and manage that because it's always an ongoing thing, right? Some APIs change quite regularly, in fact. So this is definitely one of the plus points of having this available to your customers directly in here. And then our community also built a lot of apps. So we have 300 plus global connectors and a community connector. We now have a running total about 700 plus, bringing the total to about 1,000 plus connectors. So here, our community has the ability to kind of list all these applications on the community library as well.
And this is great, sort of from also sort of building an ecosystem. Let's say your app is primarily focused around marketing, and within marketing there are a set of apps that sort of the important apps are generally already supported, and then but you want some of your partners that you sort of often work with you to build connectors to their applications and make them available, so they can just build and publish that connector into the community, and then it's sort of immediately discoverable, usable by everyone. And also we provide full details in terms of sort of like the history, the versioning history of what version is this, what went into it. You can view the source, so like complete transparency into sort of how it works. So and then you can then choose to install that into your account and make it available to your customers and so on, as well as when these things are updated, you get a notification that this update was done. Are you interested in actually incorporating that update into your version?
So on the next slide, we have an overview of what the custom connector screen kind of looks like. So as mentioned earlier, custom connectors, if you have a really long tail of asks from customers, you can choose to build these connectors by yourselves, and it really has been really our team has kind of really taken the simplification of that into consideration, and customers are now kind of churning out custom connectors really quickly. Can get one up and going in a week or two.
And
Hey,
for the
Grace.
simple ones, go ahead.
Sorry, Gautam, a question. What kind of control partners have in terms of making these connectors available? Is it all or nothing, or can they select which set of connectors or application connectivity is available to their customers?
I mean, in terms of like, could you selectively make certain applications available to certain customers? Or
I think the way I understand, like we have thousands of connectors. So does it mean all those thousand become automatically available to the
oh,
customers
got it. Yeah.
partners,
So
or is it, yeah?
yeah, all of these are available, but it is generally very unusual for our embed partners to make them all available, just because it just ends up creating a very sort of clustered, complex experience for your customers. So generally, you are able to pick and select what applications that you want to make available, and you also have a little bit more control with the plan. You can have, based on when you have multiple plans, some plans you can make certain apps available, some and so on. So you also have the ability to sort of further segment based on sort of within your customer base what apps they have access to. And the same thing applies for the integrations themselves as well. So yes, it's definitely, and that's also the more sort of popular approaches. Our embed partners present a much more smaller, fine-grained, controlled sort of set of assets and manage the user experience down to keep it simple. Grace, you want to sort of continue with custom connectors?
Sure. Yep, so I think we can move on to the next section, which is on the admin experience. So, why is this so important, right? We have built, a suite of tools on what we call the OEM admin console for you to be able to have, firstly, a good view of your customer accounts, understand what kind of integrations they're using, what apps they're using, and making sure that there's a good view of the customers as a whole. And you can also kind of drill down individually into specific customers. There's a whole range of tools for you to manage access and sharing rights to connectors that we saw earlier in recipes, as well as to share to the community. And in terms of active or auto monitoring, this is particularly important as well, because as you start scaling and as your customer base starts growing, it's really important to have a set of tools to be able to kind of handle errors as they come in, handle the ability to troubleshoot as they come in, and have that be an automated process, so your team doesn't have to do that much active monitoring in this case. So let's move to what the admin console looks like from a, so this is the kind of first landing page screen of the admin console, which is the dashboard. This really gives you a high level view and an idea of the health of your product here. You can see the number of connections, how they've been growing, number of customers, as well as the active recipes that they have. So it really gives you a high level view of what is happening across your customer base, and allows you to understand, what kind of integrations are popular among your customer base, and what kind of integrations maybe you should be kind of focusing your attention a little bit more on, or the kind of applications that your customers are using in their suite of tools.
And as well as it gives you sort of insight into not just the top users, but also the folks that are actually not doing much by way of integration, potential sort of identifying customers that may be headed towards churn and so on.
Yep. And the ability to kind of filter and kind of drill down deeper comes in the customers table. So here we're really trying to enable management at scale, right? So if you have tens or hundreds of customers, it's going to be you'll need a set of tools to kind of manage that. And we've enabled a lot of different filtering options, the ability to select different options so that you can identify the right customers to engage, or the customers that you need to reach out to by looking at this particular table here. So once you have identified that customer, clicking into that customer gives you a more detailed view. So you do get a snapshot of their dashboard and how they've been kind of performing. You can filter that by time, kind of see how the customer is doing, and also additional stats on what kind of connectors are being used and the kind of consumption new usage within this particular customer's account. You also have the ability to kind of do, change the plans, etc., that I mentioned a little bit earlier within the customer detail page as well.
And also, this is sort of like the jump off point into providing delegated administration capabilities. As in you have lots of customers, and then you want to allow your customer success team to be able to selectively go into these accounts and sort of for the purposes of debugging the customer call, you want to understand what is going on. You can assign certain types of role. You can, I mean, we support custom roles, so you can create any type of role. So you'd create essentially a role that provides your customer success team to have access to these customer accounts.
Yep, so we've seen this feature in a lot of use, especially with partner built solutions. So you can imagine the partner who needs to kind of build and manage on behalf of the customer will be using this mechanism all the time to access customer accounts and making sure everything is in order. So the last point we have here would be the automatic management part of handling exceptions, etc. We have a suite of tools and an adapter that we call recipe ops. So the ability for you to create actually a customized a recipe to manage recipes, if you will. So here we are receiving kind of error notifications among across all your customers, and kind of building a custom logic to handle that set of errors with the recipe. So you have this on your admin account, and this would help you and your team monitor a large number of customers.
So essentially, instead of writing custom code to deal with it, as usage grows, this area becomes really important and has the potential to actually really end up costing your team a lot in terms of supporting this. So what we sort of all, when you have hundreds of customers having tens of thousands of recipes and then having millions of jobs being processed a day, it gets to become, I mean, it's sort of like, it requires administration. So we provide a set of APIs, actually even before APIs, at the default, at the most basic level, we are able to stream all of these logs to sort of like your favorite destination, like a Datadog or a Splunk and so on. So you can sort of manage this like how you're managing the other such assets within your company. And then we also provide this ability to actually use recipes to actually manage and monitor all these sort of customer integrations that are running. So instead of having to write code, you just use recipes, and these recipes can listen for job failures, connection failures, disconnects, connects, and then you can triage, sort of you can automate how you recover from it just as part of the recipe logic. And of course, all the things that are sort of we make available through recipe ops, we also make it available through a set of APIs as well.
That's exactly right. So I think we're just right on time here. So I think we'd like to thank everybody for listening in, and thank everyone for your questions as well. So if you are interested in kind of looking at anything in greater detail, please do reach out. Yeah, thank you very much, everyone.
Thank you, everyone.
Thanks, Grace. Thanks, Gautam. And for folks who wanted to know if you'll receive a recording of this webinar, if you've registered, we'll be sending you a recording later today or early tomorrow. Thanks again for joining us, and we'll speak to you in 2 weeks.